My name is Stefan. I'm a workplace strategist working for Haworth. Haworth is a global company. And as a workplace strategist, I'm connected to research. So we are doing a lot of research in our organization, and I will talk about that in a minute. So as you mentioned, as you can hear about my funny accent, I'm based in Germany. I'm working for Haworth in Europe, and we are doing engagements with clients to talk about workplace strategy, to develop a strategy for space environments more on a higher level. So the contact to research is pretty important for us. There's also a group of researchers at Haworth, and we span the entire globe. So roughly 25 people working in our research and workplace strategy organization. This was a picture of our last summit in Barcelona last year. So we get together quite often, discuss about what is going on in the different regions, what is actually also on the top lists of research. And out of that, we define together also research activities which span, again, the global perspective. Research activities like discussion about innovation for sure, the topic about legible space, how important it is to your productivity to create space which is easy to read, easy to understand for users, or well-being, a top premium topic we focus on. Focus work is also something which is really important, not only just to close the door, but what is affecting your concentration. So we built a human performance lab where we are able to wire up people to measure what is going on in your brain when distraction is coming in. So, and the idea is also on one side for sure to inject this knowledge into furniture, but for sure also to make it available for you in projects to discuss also your priorities. Design for happiness, I followed the conversation, and as far as I understood, there was also a large discussion about happiness and feeling good and happy at work. And we think as well that this is a valid topic to think about what creates this feeling that somebody needs me in my work process and how I'm able to contribute. So collaboration, future technology, it's a wide field talking about the newest technology. We are not a tech company, but we are pretty much interested how technology will be impacting your work, the future of work at your desk in the future. Collaboration, the next generation, not the generation Y, the next one, it's also an interesting perspective, and why generations are matter for sure. You all want to attract the best talents to your organization and keep them. So this is also a big topic for us to investigate. Another thing is that we not only sit on our own turf and think about the future of work from the Haworth perspective. So we are collaborating, and this was also announced in the introduction. We are also collaborating with organizations like the Royal College of Art in London. It's pretty interesting because they approach research or these topics more from the perspective of art, architecture, and design. We did 2 years back, we published a nice book called Life of Work. This Life of Work book was, together with the Royal College of Art, more about what we can learn from the world around us, not in the office. So we walked out and collect a lot of interesting findings. So this book is published, so it's available. And currently, we are in a 3-year engagement with them about innovation, because innovation is the new currency, if you want. Everybody is talking about innovation. And the question is where innovation is coming from. Is it an object, a chair, something, a space, or just a situation that people get together? And there's no research about that, which is pretty interesting. And you all know that innovation, there's a driver for that. But knowing also maybe better if there's a connection between object, space, architecture, design, and people, and how people getting together. So we are also partnering with an organization called The Hub. I noticed that there is also a hub in Istanbul. We are together with the founder of the Hub idea, Indy Johar, and we discussed also this idea. And he said, hey, we are opening up a new impact hub in Birmingham. So we are using that hub as a kind of reference point where we investigate also how the users, the community is interacting and try to measure also kind of the journey they have. So pretty interesting. Stay tuned. We will publish the reports, I think, mid of this year. And it will be also a nice publication. So if you come to Orgatech in Cologne, end of the year, this will for sure also a topic where we will be able to talk about as well. So going back to the slide before, WorkTech Academy is also a fantastic source. We are partnering with WorkTech Academy. Maybe if you check the website, there is also a possibility to follow our research. It's a great source for getting also top information about research, about actual trends and stuff like that. So why we are doing that? Because I talked about the new currency innovation, so we want to learn more about this economy, the new economy of work. There's another partner in Germany, maybe you know Fraunhofer as well, is one of the biggest organizations in Europe about research. So more than 20,000 people are in this organization. We are partnering with them. There's a roundtable with many industries called Office 21. And our thoughts are circling around here, what is coming up from the technology parts in the future, how people will work, and especially this institution called AIO in Stuttgart. And this is the building. By the way, they're building fantastic buildings, also with top-notch technology infrastructure, and it's also worth to visit this kind of environments. So, and what we did over the last years, we published already one first research about co-working. Co-working was actually also a discussion this morning, which is great to see that this is really everywhere in the meantime. So the first publication we did together with Fraunhofer, or Fraunhofer with us, was about co-working. What is co-working? What is behind the story of co-working? And it was published 2 years ago. And now we published last year a new study. And I brought 2 copies with me along, and I would leave it here for your interest. So what is now coming up with the corporates? Because we realize that more and more corporates are integrate this kind of co-working idea into their own real estate strategy, into their own environments. I know that SAP, for example, or many others already did environments like that. And this is pretty interesting. So the co-working idea was more an external place to go. Now it looks like that is more coming in and influence also the environments at corporates. We did a study with CEO, because there's also the question about security. Is it a risk to open the door and let people in? And it was interesting to understand that there is the potential is much higher than the risk on the other side. So I definitely invite you to take a closer look at this as well. So, and this discussion internally and externally leads also to a kind of understanding of trends. And you heard already a lot of trends in discussion this morning, and I will build on that and for sure maybe take that as a kind of summary. For sure, the future is digital, and digital means not only to make that available as a PDF, so to scan and present digital documents. It's more about a digital process and the question how the digital process is from the customer's journey maybe towards the end visible in the company. And this is more a struggle what we can see in the companies today to change from a traditional work process towards more an integrated digital aspect. And beside that, artificial intelligence is also rising up, and the question is what will stay in the future, which jobs will be affected. And so this cause, for sure, also a lot of new questions. If it's good or not, we don't know, but it's absolutely the fact that it's visible. And this touch also how people will work in the future. So fluid collaboration means not only what we have today in open environments, it's more also the question how technology support this fluid collaboration, working inside the office, outside, while traveling. And it's also will touch the company culture as well. There was also the discussion this morning about culture, and I think culture is also a fantastic topic where you can get deeper and energize your organization. So co-working, I will close the topic about co-working here. So this will stay. This is not a trend anymore. The better question is how to integrate co-working gets integrated in a real estate strategy in organizations. In 2 years, there's an estimation of 25,000 co-working locations available with close to 4 million user or member. And this is interesting. And it was more in this startup smart working corner, and now it's really an industry. And what will this leads to? Maybe furniture as a service. So we realized that more interest is going into the direction, why not renting an entire building with all the furniture, all the hardware, all the infrastructure on a monthly basis for 600 people. The first results, first examples are already happened. And is this something where we will add something new in the strategy of the real estate for organizations? Because you rent a building for 5 years, 10 years, you equip the building, you have to maintain and so on. And maybe you're not professional in this way because your main business is something different. So this could be also something more on a broader scale. App-centric. So you can find for any kind of services apps. What we see at big organizations that they build own apps for internal in-house navigation, for wayfinding, to connect people in the organization. So, and this, interestingly enough, will draw also the attention maybe from more traditional packages, software, or applications. Big data. Maybe you ever heard about the Edge in Amsterdam, a building fully equipped with sensors. They're measuring a lot of things over the day, tons of data, big data, and they start to develop services out of the data. So if I'm walking down the hallway and there's a coffee machine, and the coffee machine maybe know already that I want to get an espresso, and while I'm there, I'm getting an espresso. So this is an easy one, but to steer also the occupancy, so to steer and manage also sustainability, it's an interesting thing. For sure, you can measure also occupancy in terms of seats and areas to see and to understand which kind of environment are more productive and maybe where you need to change. So it's more also to maintain your environment. Well standards. So in the past, we measured and certified sustainability standards for buildings. So LEED, for example, there's many more in this field. And what we notice over the last 2 years, there's also this certification for inside the building. So also how you treat your organization. So nutrition, air, ventilation, but also the work concept plays a role. Why this is important? Because also when we talk about the war for talents, this is also an additional way to tell the outside world that you live in a certified environment. So this is interesting, and we don't know where this is leading to, but it's also interesting that it's going from the shell now more to the inside, because at the end the employees matter. It's an important piece to find the right people, to develop, train, to mentor them, and then for sure also to keep them. So the question, and if you take a look at countries with a high ratio of this war for talent because the productivity in this country is maybe so high. So keeping people is a key asset, and I think we discussed that also this morning. When we talk about the journey in the office, so from traditional to open to maybe also unassigned, activity-based. So the question is, what is coming next? I talked about fluid collaboration before, but now knowing that activity-based working and agile working gets integrated in organizations, this is really the question, what is the next piece of system, I would say. So I think you're all familiar with activity-based environments. So you have a certain activity and you find the right space to work for this moment at this space to be most productive. It could be in the office, outside of the office, in the Starbucks, wherever. But it's a long journey, and interestingly enough, industry by industry get hit by this kind of change. And if some major player in an industry is starting to implement activity-based workplace concepts, so there's a certain move in this direction. So it's interesting, and I think if you are still thinking with a client about the transition from a traditional work environment to an open, I think there's a few steps more you need to discuss first before you make a decision on that. There are many trends, there are many aspects, and you can find them also published on websites, WorkTech Academy on our websites, and this is just a summary I gave, and I don't want to stick too long with the trends which were already discussed in the morning. But a lot of things is also in a global perspective, not on a regional Europe or North America or AP perspective. There's a lot of things are getting together in a common way, if you want. And this is interesting that there is also a large initiative coming from the trends as well. And why creativity? And this is the main topic of my presentation. Why innovation and creativity matter? By knowing that artificial intelligence is coming up, knowing that maybe also how you get employed by your company will change, maybe on a gig basis, on a task basis, or also the war for talent. So why creativity and innovation matter? This is a fantastic point to talk about. So what we thought before we built spaces to support innovation and creativity, why not thinking first about what is creativity and innovation about? What is happening in your brain? If there are a kind of rhythm or anything you need to know before you start to create solutions, environments, because there's a lot of buzz outside and a lot of people talks about creativity and innovation, but there's, I think from our perspective, not everything structured and stated. So, and we're using brain science for smart design, or took a closer look. Our researchers took a closer look to that, and we crafted a white paper out of that to inform us and you, for sure, about what is creativity and innovation. So first of all, creativity and innovation is not the same. If you just develop a good idea and keep that with you, nothing will happen. So it's more the question how to express, how to cycle, and how to discuss also the ideas to come to a certain innovation. From the novel idea to create something which is useful for others. So this is the cycle, and this is the foundational understanding about creativity and innovation, what we need to know about it to make it available. If Steve Jobs stops in this level just with the great idea of the iPod or whatever, nothing would happen. And this is also a kind of cycle at the end. And what's happening also today is, if you take a look at the tech industry, there's a lot of going on. And the frequency of new inventions are growing from year to year. And for sure, with this research, we want to unmask also the myth of creativity, which is maybe known in the outside world. First of all, creativity is a gift, would be our first myth, and this is not true. So creativity is a skill which you can learn, and it's based on a cognitive process. So everybody is creative, and there's also a way how to work in a kind of process through this creative aspects. So there are 4 stages for a creative process. And this is not surprisingly, there's preparation to get information, to gain expertise, to get an impulse. It could be something written, but it could be also discussion. This kind of preparation phase could be very different and broad. Incubation, it's pretty much important because what is happening, if you get new ideas, they need to sink in and need to connect with the knowledge you already have. And out of this, connection, there's the insight phase where you maybe get this aha moment where you think, oh my God, I know this. And this is sometimes you get goosebumps in this moment. And then this is the verification. So to talk about that, to talk about the idea and talk about what is really new. And maybe at this certain point, the idea went out. So it's dying because maybe it's not relevant anymore. And this cycle maybe will start from the beginning with preparation. So, and if you have this in mind, and you're all doing this for sure, but you're maybe not aware, and this should help to make topics in this presentation aware and give you the possibility to discuss about that. And there's also cognitive support in a different in the cycle, in the process. So one is the convergent support where you build and generate ideas and qualify ideas. And there is the divergent phase where you're open also for external impulse, where you're not concentrated on a certain topic. And this is also important to know because this is also, this trigger also different activities in your brain. If you are more in the verification and preparation phase, or if you are more in insights and incubation. And this is, I would say, a fundamental aspects. And a skill, like all skills, if you train and practice the skill, you can get better to find the right ideas, select the best ideas. And it's something like, like training a muscle. And like start drawing or doodling stuff, you get better as often you're doing things. And I think this is also the invitation to us to think more in this creative cycle. So the second myth is about the brain. As you can see, there's a right side and a left side. And very often somebody said creativity involves just the right side of the brain. And again, this is not true, because creativity use different networks. There are 3 networks controlling the creative process, the thinking process, and it spans through the entire brain. So it's not a gift, and it's not only the right side of the brain where creativity sits. And this is important, because sometimes when we talk to people, I'm not creative, I can't do that. But this is not true. So it's maybe also for the organization to unleash the potential of the people and help them to express. And by knowing that, this is maybe easier. So the 3 networks, the first one is the executive control network. This, like the name, it's help you to control. The bad news is that your cognitive capacity is limited. So if you get too much, noise, distraction, not noise, if you get too much from the external to your awareness, then it's hard to concentrate. So what is happening in this situation when you, for example, read a text first time, or if you want to learn a language, what you will do? You will do that at the busiest place you can find? For sure not. You will looking for a quiet spot. So this phase and this network requires focus. So this means it makes sense to reduce distraction. And clever, smart design concepts always take this in account, that you need also areas for focus and closed areas where you not find any distraction. It's not only the phone booth, it's really an environment where you can concentrate with reduced impulse or distraction from external. And if you want, without focus, there's no innovation. So if you leave that away, there's definitely the risk to not getting prepared in the right way. So the second network is the default standard imagination network. And you all know this. If your brain goes into a kind of standard mode, if you're doing things on a routine basis, I don't know, driving a car, put in your shoes in the morning, walking out to commute to the office. So there are some standard routines, and sometimes you don't remember what you did in the last half hour because this network is taking over. And this is interesting also that in this standard routine default imagination network, when this has happened, if you're daydreaming, this is also interesting because in this moment, your brain gets, if you want, inefficient and use the capacity to do different things, like connecting dots, coming up with the connection of what I talked about before, about knowledge, new things. And sometimes, the situation, you have this spark where you think, oh my God, again. So, and this is happening quite often in this situation where your brain actually is inefficient and use the capacity for other things. So again, smart design involves this kind of environments where you find rest, where you can lay back. If you think also about transition from one spot, from one building to another, this could be also something where your brain gets in a certain mode to be more in this default imagination situation. And without rest, again, there is no innovation. And the salient network, the third one, it's an interesting gatekeeper, if you want. This trigger and this help you to control what is coming to your awareness. So if there's something coming in and your brain think it's relevant for you, then there is the ability to deroute that into your, make that available for you. And if it's not relevant, then it's, you get no attention to that. And maybe you know the situation if you sit in your office and there are 20 people around you and they're talking about actual projects and customers and problems and everything is relevant to you. So to find this way in this environment, the way to concentrate, it's not so easy because there's always something coming in. Sometimes you put your headphones on. It's also a way to avoid distraction, but you can do also something different. For example, if this guy here in this coffee place, there are maybe also 20 people around him, and they're talking about things, but things are not relevant to him. So this is not something which comes to his attention, and he can work perfectly also in this kind of noisy environment. So it's not always the noise, it's more about the relevant information. So knowing about the three different networks, so the executive control network, the default network, and the salience network, this is something which all of us have in common. And knowing that, there's also the question where this can lead to. You ever heard about the headline flow? So if you're in a peak performance, and if you're in a mode with groups or alone, to work on things, sometimes it's like that hours feels like minutes and you totally forgot that lunchtime is already over. And this is a kind of flow and where really, really peak performance. And this is something where organizations are able also to support exactly an environment which supports flow or this peak performance aspects. The third myth is about creativity is coming from people with the same thinking. This is not true, because you need also conflicts, especially when you talk about verification, to have the same-minded people around you, and everybody's saying, oh yeah, it's a great idea. Then maybe the failure is coming up pretty late. So you need this kind of discourse or constructive discussion and conflicts through an innovation phase. But you need to steer that. And for sure, it's easier to organize yourself sometimes. But to organize also an innovative approach in a group, it's more challenging, to prepare an environment to offer all the different aspects. This is maybe also the reason why organizations quite often book themselves into co-working spaces, because there's a secured environment. There is also specific applications available. But for sure, if you want to be a true innovative organization, then you need to take care also about that for groups as well. And there's also rules for group activities. So the engagement should be respectful. You know all this. You should expect also failures, and even more important that you fail quick and often. Deadlines is sometimes poison for a creative process, sometimes not, to get up and running. But you have to manage, also the environment and also the group in terms of engagement. So how we apply this knowledge into workplace design, there's also a kind of guidelines or guidance we think, which is important for sure. There's a range of environments which is necessary for focus, for rest, for in-between, for transition. For sure, this spaces environment should be equipped with the right technology. And we don't know what the right technology is for your business. So this is also something which is pretty much a key aspect. And I talked about transition in the in-between spaces, so productive work environments, areas for rest. There's also something in between, and we think this is also pretty important. So it could be the architecture, a balcony, a roof terrace, an outside garden. So I think this is also very important in the design process of architecture for an organization to know exactly what they think about the environment in terms of innovation. Because this could be a fantastic also brief or add to the brief for the architect to accomplish all the aspects we think. Because, you can build fantastic environments without running in this direction necessarily. This is not productive for the organization. And the creative rhythm, I talked about the cycle and the creative rhythm, how to trigger and motivate people to come up with this idea in groups or alone. This deserves also a kind of structure, and I will come to that in a minute. So there is also, this is maybe a bit of a dry chart, but it talks again about the structure. You have the convergent, where you need high attentional control, focus for sure. This should be in terms of privacy, barriers closed. Then there's maybe something in between where privacy is not too high. And there's something which is maybe open also for external stimuli and impulse, the activity and for sure autonomy. And autonomy plays also a major role in all this kind of processes. If you empowered to do, choose specific spaces, to change your position, to open up also new chapters to think about. This is also something which foster and support an innovation, creative and innovation environment. So just simple, as a summary, acoustics for sure, focus and bus. Buses, as I said before, it's also sometimes important not to have everything controlled and to create this kind of bus and where environments get, engaged you can work there for sure. Like I explained you with the sailing network, there's a system in us who controls also this kind of environments. Transparency, visual needs for imagination and or preparation. So transparency, visible connection, being visible connection, legible, easy to read what this or this means in the space, so that you not need any manual to get into the space and work there. It should be really easy to understand. And if you do your homework well and do the observation and stuff like that, then it's at the end easy to build on that. Adjacencies and connectivity, I think I covered that already. Connectivity and technology, I will talk about that also later. So for example, this is an office of a global innovation director. He controls the innovation in this organization. And there's a work desk, height adjustable, where he usually do his preparation work. There is a kind of library behind him. There's also, objects, materials, but he can use also all walls around him to take notes, to discuss things, and make things available. But it's separated, isolated, if you want. It's glass, but it's transparent, but it's enclosed. And there's a reason for that. And there is maybe group focus. And group focus can look totally different. There's also walls for sure to enclose the space, using the walls to write on. There is different postures possible, like seats. There's a stool, a high bench, and for sure there's also technology. And technology is also an interesting piece because we realize that it's more and more technology coming up to support creative work. For example, this technology, Bluescape, allow to use a canvas, which is an infinity project space in a cloud. You can write on this surface, on this touchscreen, but you can manipulate also the content. So you can open up an Excel spreadsheet, and with the normal gestures, you can work on this surface to explain. The interesting thing is you have everything, all the sources in front of you, not like in a PowerPoint or in a file server. And you can use it like a pen in your hand to mark and discuss, which is maybe in the verification stage pretty much handy and interesting to use this kind of technology. So at the end, technology is coming in more to support people and not, to be too much present. It's more about the people standing maybe in front of the screen discussing and calling up different aspects or taking notes. And this kind of technology, which is available already, this kind of technology will impact and come in much more often in the future at the workplace. For sure, you need some space also for leisure, for restore, getting back, recover, doing other things. And sometimes if you're in a controlled environment, this is not so easy to let people go. So this touch also the culture piece again. But this is also important. If we talk about innovation and creative thinking processes, this kind of work, it's also necessary to move on. And this is also the transition. When I talked about the activity-based workplace and environments, there's something coming in, with autonomy, freedom to choose environments. So this is also something we need to take into account. Or group restore. There's a coffee place, and everything is organized to invite people and bring people together. Not like a Starbucks coffee. It's more maybe different. But it's always about the design and the architecture and the intent of the designer, how this space should look like. But it's possible to have this kind of spaces for gathering. So the X factor, the organization and culture. So culture is a big driver for sure. If you have not the wrong culture, but there's no wrong and right culture, I think. It's more the question if you have the culture which allow innovation and creative processes or not. If you want to focus on innovation and creativity, then you need also to, to work on your culture and think about how the culture, your culture, should look like in the future. Because there's maybe reduced hierarchy. There's also a way to embrace conflicts, constructive conflicts, and also the common goals. There's a lot of things, and I'm not judging, and there's no wrong and right culture outside this room. And I think it's more the question, the foundational question about what our company should aim as a common goal in the future. And by the way, you can assess also culture. What we are using through surveys, what we are using is a framework from Cameron Quinn. It's a researcher, researchers in the University of Michigan. And they brought up this, and it's not recent, I think it's more than 15 years old, but it's still really actual. And they divided or help us to select and differentiate and define or talk about culture. If it's a culture which is more focused, stable, not to change, or is it a culture which is flexible, the upper dimension, or is it the culture which is more oriented to the inside, or is it a culture which is more oriented to the outside? And in these dimensions, this creates 4 quadrants. The control culture, in a control culture, you always want to do things right. You want to avoid mistakes. You will not go for risk because everything should be structured and processed, which is good. To avoid mistakes, it's a good thing. On the other side, there's the create culture. Their intention is to do things first, to look for new opportunities, to look for risk, uncertainties. And you can feel that there's a tension between this control and the create culture. And there's also the other axis like compete, which is more doing things fast. Maybe a typical sales organization is located here. Or the collaborative culture where the organization is like a big family. We take care about each other. We want to do things together. And this is interesting, and you can measure and then to align your different levels like leadership and people and match that against this model. And the interesting question is not where you are today, which is also interesting, but the bigger question is where you want to go in the future. Because this is maybe having a huge impact to your environment, to your processes, to your architecture, to your space. And here, the dotted lines is the preferred culture. So what you think about the next 3, 4, 5 years, because culture is not to change just from today till tomorrow. So the tendency, as you can see here in this example, is to move more to a flexible organization, more collaborative and create culture. And moving from down to up, from left to right, there's a lot of work to do, like taking the people with you on a journey. This is also a top decision to support like that. And so if you think about innovation and creativity, it's not just only going into we want to be a create, whatever. It's have to do with the fundamental aspects of your organization. So to put it together as a kind of summary, the project, the need for focus, the need for restoration, for rest, for groups and for individuals, and in addition to that, also to find ways to use your environment for transition, because now that your brain works in a certain situation, in a certain rhythm and mode, and all these aspects will help you to become more creative and innovative in the future. So you, as an organization, you need to define the right place, space. You need to help the people also to get the right tools, to find also the rhythm, the right rhythm of work and all the aspects the 2 panels in the morning talked about. at the end, to get also on a stage where you can be more creative. And it's not a gift and it's not a magic formula. It's more something everybody is able to provide. What we thought about was also to come up with a kind of playful environment and think about what could be this kind of environment can look like. So we created magic. Now we create a kind of 360 environment where we think to illustrate not only the settings but also materials, also colors, surfaces to support different activities. So there is a space where you can find more focus environments, spaces where you do maybe your normal task work, but also process work, your standard work, which is also pretty important for sure. Then again, maybe space for individuals to get together and verify different aspects. So an office environment can look like that. It should be not exactly like this, but what I want to encourage here to think about all aspects of design implications like colors, materials, but also the shape of certain environments. So, and having that also connected in a kind of experience, you can see there's also the availability of technology. So at the end, so we created also a kind of 360 VR experience. My colleague here, she brought a VR glasses along. So if you want to jump into the scenery here, you're free to do so in the break. And we take care that you will come back for sure. So if you want to learn more about that, about this topic of innovation, I mentioned the web page before, where you can able to download tons of white paper. Recent one about legible space, designing for happiness, and also for innovation. And yeah, thank you for your interests. It was a pleasure to be here and have fun with the afternoon.